Welcome to The Story. We're taping this on Sunday morning because it's a bit of a historic moment and so unusual. I'm in the middle of Interstate 84 in downtown Portland. We're here because there's been a huge effort underway overnight to clean a massive stretch of graffiti along here, and it's looking pretty good. You've probably seen some of the coverage by now, but what you haven't seen is my one-on-one conversation with Governor Kotek. We're going to talk about graffiti, livability, and the future of Portland. And we heard from a lot of our viewers when they heard this was going to go on. Very excited, saying, finally, this will be great. Okay. But again, I got to bring you back to the question, how do you keep it from reappearing tonight? Maybe not all of it, but the tagging goes on.
Well, if it does reappear, if we start seeing things, I think what people need to know is we're not going to stop. This is just the beginning. And I think it's people saying to folks, if you know someone who's doing this, say like, hey, is that what you want your community to look like? How about here instead? How about there instead? And we have to provide those opportunities for folks. Is there any executive action that you can take that would either enhance penalties against them or make it harder? I think what's on the books now is, we need to enforce it. It was good to see that coverage of the one tagger and all the, in his garage supply that they had, really monitoring that. We have made it harder in the city, I think, to get spray paint. Buy that, yeah. Oh, yeah. As someone who had to buy a can once, I'm like, yeah, I got to get outside the locked door and all this stuff. Trying to paint patio furniture or something. Right, exactly. I think it's important for people to know this isn't a one and done. You don't solve everything in one night. This is a reset for this corridor. People have to stand up for their own community and say, like, yeah, I'm going to pick up the trash. I see it. I'm going to ask people not to do this when let's talk to our kids. It's like, this is not what you should be doing. And I think this kind of livability project just begets more pride in the city, and hopefully that will have long-term impact as well.
Well, hello, everyone. As you can see, I am not Pat Doris. David Mulco here filling in. Pat's feeling a bit under the weather tonight, but we wanted to make sure we brought you this story today since graffiti is one of the top issues we have heard from you about for the entire lifetime of the story, actually. You might remember during this year's legislative session, Oregon lawmakers approved $20 million for ODOT to clean up highways in the Portland area, including removing trash and homeless camps. $4 million was specifically earmarked to remove graffiti, and this weekend that work took a massive step forward with a 5-mile shutdown of I-84 from Saturday night to Sunday. About 13 hours overall so that crews could tackle that tagging and clean up the garbage without any vehicles around. For many visitors, landing at PDX, that stretch of interstate between I-5 and I-205, is one of their first impressions of the Rose City on their way into town. And Governor Kotek, who, by the way, joined in the painting to cover up graffiti, says making the city look better was a priority that came out of her Central City Task Force last fall. Remember that? It's something she's also heard from people across the state.
This city is so important for the entire state. I heard it on the road all last year when I was visiting all the counties, right? What's happening to Portland? Is it going to, get back to its, former glory? This is a process, and we've all been through a lot, but this city matters. It matters for our economy. It matters for people around the state, and as a governor, I have to be supportive, right? The Portland Central City Task Force was a message. As your governor, I care. We need to all work together. We can do things when we come together, and this is a perfect example of that. Yeah.
Okay, the governor told Pat something that we also hear from a lot of you. She wants to see Portland return to its glory days, so to speak, and cleaning up is a big part of that.
I have a very vivid memory of my first experience in Portland was 1987. It's when I moved out to, and I was changing trains to go down to Eugene, and I was hanging around Old Town, and I was just, having come from the East Coast, it's like, this is a really clean city. Like, yeah, it's a city. There's going to be some trash and some graffiti, but it's like, in general, very clean. It's like, that's the Portland that people remember. That's Portland people want to see going forward. And that's why one of the reasons people visit here. Yeah. It's beautiful. The city's beautiful. We want to keep it that way.
Well, of course, there is the concern, which Pat asked about right off the top, that the graffiti and maybe the garbage is just going to return as soon as the highway reopens. It reopened on Sunday, right? Well, the governor said the graffiti they cleaned up this weekend had been allowed to build for years, and ODOT's director, Chris Strickler, admitting, yeah, there's no way to guarantee it won't come back, though he did add this.
There will be some that comes back, certainly, and our efforts are to continue to attack that problem because that problem is a societal problem for all Oregonians, and everybody's experiencing the impact of that. And while I can't guarantee you that it won't come back in near term, I can guarantee you that it won't be as bad as it has been, and our crews are committed to continuing to provide that effort and provide that service so that we can continue to attack the problem.
Meanwhile, the governor says she wants to see programs that can provide other avenues, that's an interesting way of putting it, for would-be taggers.
I also hope people will put that passion into something else somewhere else, because that's passion, right? Someone really cares about what they're doing. How about we find a different place to do that and not along a roadside?
And
that's my general reaction to that.
I've heard some argue that the point is putting it where it's not supposed to be. That's part of the art.
Well, I think it's that, that challenge of, that risk taking.
Fight against the man and everything else.
So maybe we just need to give people really high walls that they can go do that somewhere else.
All right, the highway cleanup comes at the same time as Portland's new ordinance around homeless camping takes effect. Enforcement was supposed to start at the beginning of this month, was put briefly on hold because of the extreme heat. It's worth noting, so far we haven't heard of anything changing on the streets. So Pat also asked Governor Kotek what she thinks about the new ban, which we should note had to follow a state law. It is House Bill 3115 that Kotek championed when she was Speaker of the House. The law essentially says regulations around camping have to be what is called objectively reasonable.
Well, I think the new ordinance here in the city of Portland is in alignment with the law, and there's been a restriction on camping in high-risk corridors for quite a while, and I think the city's been enforcing that, and I think that's appropriate. I think common sense, everyone would say that is reasonable and objective. To say camping in along the roadside like this is very dangerous, and I think they should be enforcing that. So the legislature is going to take it up. What I'm focusing on is, does the current ordinance work? Is it being enforced fairly? And are we making progress? And I think the city's in a better spot than they were in the previous version.
And I would guess if the answer is yes to all that, then you would think nothing needs to change.
Well, I think that's the conversation the legislature has to have. It's like, how has it been working? Now, a lot of it was on hold waiting for the Supreme Court to rule on Grants Pass, but the goal here is whatever we do, let's be clear with folks. Let's make sure people are attached to services and help them get into shelter. And I think, it's working.
Of course, we're still waiting to see how those efforts bear out and if they make a difference in people's perceptions of the Rose City. But back to that stretch of I-84 for a second, because we have to wait and see as well if those combined efforts make a big difference in the way people view the city. But at least for one viewer, the cleanup has made a difference. Viewer Caprice sent us an email saying Highway 84 through town looks fabulous! Exclamation mark. Thank you, Caprice. The cleanup was far more extensive than I'd pictured. It looks so lush and refined. No graffiti. The highway signs are once again green and legible. There are no tarps, tents, hoarding piles, dirty clothes, etc. in the trees or along the side of the pavement. She went on to tell us the supports for the bridges are clear of all marking. There are no branches, trash, leaves, or discarded shoes and cans anywhere. Your earlier reporting on the cleanup inspired me to take that way, which I usually avoid, instead of the surface roads to my Monday morning appointment. What a pleasant surprise, all caps. Well done, Portland. All right, it's time for your thoughts. Tell us what you think or what you have noticed along I-84 or other highways. Are you optimistic about the efforts to clean up Portland? And in your view, what more needs to be done? You can send us an email at thestory@kdw.com or leave us a voicemail. It is 503-226-5090. Well, let us talk about a mega merger in the works, because sometime in the near future, your favorite grocery store might be undergoing some big changes. You've likely seen the headlines here. A proposed merger between the giant grocery chains Kroger and Albertsons. Well, in the Northwest, Kroger owns Fred Meyer and QFC, and Albertsons owns Safeway. Those companies are trying to sell off nearly 600 of their stores nationwide in order to get federal approval to merge. It is all because of antitrust laws. Basically, the laws are in place to keep one company from getting too big and then driving up the prices. So Albertsons and Kroger agreed to their merge back in October 2022. It is a deal worth $24.6 billion. And crucially would give them about 13% of the American grocery market. The company said they need to merge in order to better compete against the likes of Costco, Amazon, and Walmart, which, by the way, is the biggest seller of groceries in the country and holds a 22% share of the U.S. grocery market. But in February of this year, the federal government said, hold on a minute, a merger between Kroger and Albertsons would create a huge company, and the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, filed a lawsuit to stop it. By the way, that lawsuit was filed in Oregon. So all of this is going to play out right here. And Suzanne Stevens, editor of our news partner, the Portland Business Journal, has been watching it all play out.
when you bring two behemoths like that together, there are going to be antitrust concerns. The thinking is that the merger of two behemoths like that means less competition in the market. That will mean higher prices, which are not good for consumers, not great for employees often, and not great for suppliers and other kind of stakeholders around those companies. So that's why the Federal Trade Commission has gotten involved and put a hold and filed a lawsuit to block the merger.
So what do you do in response? Well, the companies are now offering up 186 Safeway, QFC, and Albertsons stores across Oregon and Washington. We've got the full list on KGW.com. You can see if your store is on there. They would all be sold to a company that is based in New Hampshire called C&S Wholesale Grocers. If you've never heard of it, you're not the only one. C&S Wholesale Grocers is a much smaller company, and if this deal is approved, would more than triple the size of its grocery portfolio. Right now, they actually don't have any brick and mortar stores on the West Coast.
Taking on all of these new brands and managing them, the logistics of managing those, the ramping up that company is going to have to do on the management side, the hiring it's going to have to do, the expertise it's going to need to manage what is going to be also a huge grocery brand across the country is another issue to be concerned about. That's not easy to do, to ramp up that quickly. We've seen it as covering business. We look at expansions of companies all the time. Slow and steady is often the way to make it happen. This will not be slow and steady when it comes to C&S Warehouse.
Well, in the South and Midwest, you might be familiar with Piggly Wiggly. They're a chain of grocery stores that are actually owned by C&S, although the majority of them are independently operated franchises. So does that mean that your local Safeway might eventually become a Piggly Wiggly? Well, bottom line, too soon to tell. The sale offer includes the branding for QFC, and C&S has indicated in California and other states that it intends to keep the Albertsons name on those stores. As for the Kroger Albertsons merger, the elephant in the room, a hearing is set for next month in federal court in Portland. We'll be sure to keep you posted as this process develops. Still to come on the story, what's being called one of the largest cases of taxpayer fraud in Washington state history. We'll show you who allegedly stole nearly $900,000, why an auditor says it's a wake-up call, and what's being done to stop it from happening again when the story returns. Welcome back. This November's election will be one of the most consequential in recent memory. And forget the White House and all of that. We're talking about local terms. That is because Portland voters will be electing those who will take part in a brand new form of city government, a mayor plus 12 city councilors. It's all changing, though. We want to show you what won't be showing up on the ballot, at least in Multnomah County. Earlier this year, we told you about the Portland Police Union's ballot initiative that would reshape and scale back a yet-to-be-implemented police oversight board that voters overwhelmingly approved in 2020. 82%, by the way, in favor. So the union's measure would have removed the new oversight board's ability to discipline officers and instead leave it up to the police chief. That's how it's done in cities like Seattle, Tacoma, San Francisco, and New York. It would also have allowed for current and former law enforcement members to be part of the board, which is not permitted by what voters approved 4 years ago. Well, the union's initiative was declared void this month because, it turns out, they didn't turn in enough signatures by the July 5th deadline. So one less thing there on the November ballot. For what it's worth, the city says 0 initiative petitions qualified. All the others were either withdrawn or, in the case of the police union's other ballot initiative, it's around police staffing, ruled unconstitutional by a judge. That's the end of that. Well, a Washington state employee is accused of stealing nearly $900,000, and state auditors say it's the biggest case of taxpayer fraud involving a state employee in decades, perhaps even the largest of all time. Drew Mickelson looks into how the money was stolen and what happened when officials started asking questions.
Olympia police are now investigating the claims that this former state employee was making payments to himself with an agency credit card. The auditors blame a lack of oversight, something that agency now says will never happen again. The state's Office of Administrative Hearings conducts hearings for citizens who have complaints against state agencies. During a routine audit last spring, state auditors say they found a series of expenses that didn't make sense. Between June of 2019 and May 2023, investigators say they found $878,000 in funds considered misappropriated through payments made with an agency credit card.
And went back to the agency and said, we need more information to verify why you have this spike. And when we did that, that's when this individual left the office, got away, if you will.
Auditor Pat McCarthy says the employee responsible for the payments immediately went on unexpected leave in May of 2023. He resigned the next month, and then in July of last year, Olympia police started investigating him. According to the audit, the employee was making payments to 4 businesses that he owned. Quote, there were no records available to show any business activity for them other than charging the agency for no clear purpose.
The good people that work at the OAH didn't want this to happen, but it did because of this lack of internal controls. It seems so simple, but you know what? People get complacent. And I think this is a wake-up call for everyone.
In addition to all those missing funds, the auditors also noted that there was a lack of oversight. This employee was the only one with access to the credit cards or the statements. A spokesperson for the Office of Administrative Hearings now says a manager has access to that account and it is reviewed regularly. While it's not clear what happened to all the money, the only documentation found in the audit was that some of the money was allegedly used to pay this former state employee's cell phone bills and also used to buy some gift cards.
I'll bet it's reviewed regularly. Drew Mickelson in Olympia there. Well, up next on this story, it's an iconic local brand worth billions of dollars. But how did Columbia Sportswear get its name? Well, cue Devin Haskins with his KGW fan favorite series. He takes a look back that stretches nearly a century. That's when the story returns. Well, while we're not wishing the summer away, we do need a plan for the KGW School Supply Drive. Head to kgw.com/school to set up your organization, and we will send you a collection kit. Keep in mind, supplies you help collect will stay in your school district. kgw.com/school. Well, finally tonight, one of Oregon's biggest sportswear companies did not start out selling clothes or gear, and when it was once on the verge of bankruptcy, almost no one wanted to buy it. Though today, Columbia Sportswear, is worth billions. Devin Haskins sits down with its CEO in his latest edition of What's in a Name.
The company's been around for more than 80 years, growing from a small local shop to a multi-billion-dollar business. But it's that in-between time, from small to big, when Columbia Sportswear saw its biggest challenges.
Yeah, so this is a big part of the business today, which is...
Before Columbia Sportswear started selling outdoor gear, it was a much smaller company.
We've been very, very fortunate. I mean, we've had lots of great help. And
this is Tim Boyle, the company's current CEO and president.
Hi, I'm Gert Boyle, Chairman of Columbia Sportswear. My son Tim, our president.
When you think of Columbia, Gert Boyle's One Tough Mother commercials and no-nonsense approach to running the business may come to mind. But it was her father, Tim's grandfather, Paul Lamfrom, who started it all. And before he opened a business in Portland, he ran a successful one in Germany.
He had a little business that made shirts, which he sold in the local markets, and he wanted to get out of Germany.
It was 1938, and Hitler had already taken power. As a Jew in Nazi Germany, Paul had his business taken away from him. So he and his family fled the country and settled in Portland.
My grandfather bought a little hat and cap company called Rosenfeld Hat Company, but he, just coming from Nazi Germany, he didn't want to have a Jewish name on the business, so he picked what 90% of the businesses in Portland are at Columbia. It was the Columbia Hat Company.
For more than a decade, the company would do good business, selling all sorts of hats.
The hat business was in place firmly from 1938 till call it the 1950s. And then all of a sudden, men in America quit wearing hats. So that became a problem if you're in the hat business.
The Columbia Hat Company needed a new approach in order to stay alive. So they tried to sell literally everything.
The family cast about trying to sell all sorts of stuff, everything from Little League uniforms to boats and swimsuits and just almost anything that you could think of.
Just trying to see if something would stick.
Yep. And luckily what stuck was something called a rope toe mitten.
In 1950, Tim Boyle's dad, Neil, had joined the family business. The Columbia Hat Company had rebranded itself to reflect what it now sold, thus becoming Columbia Sportswear. This was the early logo. It would later change to the woven fabric look that we know today. Two products helped the company grow, the mittens and a fishing vest.
What the company was founded on were those two ideas, rope toe mittens, fishing vests, and then we started manufacturing a few ancillary items that were along the lines of other outdoor products, and that was what really sustained the business for many years.
Neil took over the business in 1964, but died suddenly of a heart attack 6 years later. The company fell on hard times.
He made every mistake he could possibly make.
So Tim dropped out of school to help run the company with his mom, Gert. Almost immediately, Columbia Sportswear was on the verge of bankruptcy. It tanked.
Things were bad, yeah. And then things got worse because we had no idea what we were doing, and it was a very tough time.
The bank came calling to collect on outstanding loans and suggested they sell the company. They tried, but only one offer came in, a measly $1,400.
And my mom simply just said, I can drive it in the ground myself. I don't need that.
I had it up to here, and I fired everybody, and we started all over again.
Things turned around. They reduced the amount of items they sold in their catalog and started importing products from overseas.
We started to design some interesting and unusual products. Primarily, the Bugaboo Parka was our real first launch of an unusual, highly differentiated item.
Columbia Sportswear was off to a good start. It would only get better from there. What started out as a hat store in downtown Portland has grown to be a lucrative worldwide sportswear brand.
When you look at to see what Columbia is today, was that the vision 50 years ago?
No, I mean, if I ever thought we would survive, that would be way greater than I ever thought we would be successful doing.
Columbia Sportswear went public in 1998 and today employs thousands of employees around the world. They have 3 other brands under their name and are poised to bring in more than $3 billion this year alone. I'm Devin Haskins, KGW News.
I had no idea they're rope toe bitten, but it all makes sense, right? Okay, a quick programming note. The story returns to its usual 6:30 time slot tomorrow, Tuesday, though there is no show Wednesday or Thursday because of NBC's special coverage of the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. On behalf of the story team and everyone at KGW News, I'm David Molko. Thanks so much for watching. I'll be back in just over an hour with your headlines. Hope to see you then. Have a good night, everyone.